Get ready, investors. NorthFlow Finance AI breaks down the top TSX stocks from the week of August 3rd, tracking 12 game changers, what's hot, and what's not. We're starting off our weekly review with stock number 1, SCZ.V, where we detected a signal on May 12, 2026. This signal was detected when the stock was trading at $12.86. The signal we detected was a moving average golden cross combined with a volume surge, which is a pretty bullish indicator, meaning it's a good sign for the stock to go up in price. At the time, the Relative Strength Index or RSI was at 60.9, which isn't overly extended, so there was still room for the stock to run. The volume surge was also impressive, up 53.9%, which showed us that there was a lot of interest in the stock at that time. This week, the stock had a great performance, gaining 26.3%. It opened at $9.27, reached a high of $12.18, and a low of $8.83, closing at $11.71. This move higher definitely validates the original signal we detected, as the stock has continued to trend upwards. The stock's ability to hold its gains and close near the highs of the week is also a positive sign. There's been some recent attention on undiscovered gems in Canada, and it seems like SCZ.V is getting noticed, which could be contributing to its recent price action, as investors look for hidden gems to invest in. This attention could potentially bring in more buyers and drive the price even higher. Looking ahead to next week, we'll be watching to see if the stock can continue its upward momentum, and if it can break through any resistance levels. We'll also be keeping an eye on the volume to see if it can continue to support the stock's price action. Now let's move on to our next stock. We're reviewing stock number 2 of 12, ATX.TO, where we detected a signal on August 4, 2026. The signal was detected on this particular day, so let's dive into the details of what happened with this stock. The MA Golden Cross Plus volume surge signal is a pretty strong indicator, and in this case, it meant that the short-term moving average crossed above the long-term moving average, combined with a significant surge in volume, which was up 149.8%. At the time, the RSI was at 52.1, which is relatively neutral, but the volume surge and the golden cross suggested a potential trend reversal. This signal indicated that the stock might be ready to break out, and with the entry price at $2.46, it was an interesting opportunity. This stock gained 11.1% this week, which is a pretty significant move, and it opened at $2.43, reached a high of $2.80, and a low of $2.27, closing at $2.70. This performance does seem to validate the original signal, as the stock has continued to trend upward. The move upward was quite strong, and it will be interesting to see if it can continue. The weekly performance was definitely a positive development for this stock. There hasn't been any recent news on this stock, but looking at the sector as a whole, it's been relatively stable. The sector outlook is still cautiously optimistic, as there are no major changes or disruptions that would affect the overall trend. As we look ahead to next week, viewers should watch for whether the stock can continue its upward momentum, and if it can break through any potential resistance levels. We'll also be keeping an eye on the volume to see if it can maintain its current levels, which would be a positive sign for the stock's continued growth. Now let's move on to our next stock. We're taking a closer look at MDA.TO, a stock that caught our attention when a signal was detected on August 4. This signal was triggered by a combination of a MACD bullish crossover and a significant volume surge, which is always an interesting development. The MACD bullish crossover plus volume surge signal is a technical indicator that suggests a potential shift in the stock's momentum, and when we saw this happen on August 4, it meant that the stock was likely due for a rally, given the strong buying interest. At the time, the RSI was at 51.1, which is relatively neutral, and the volume surge was an impressive 186.4%, indicating a lot of enthusiasm from investors. This combination of factors made for a compelling bullish case. This week, MDA.TO gained 12%, opening at $43.06, reaching a high of $49.35, and a low of $41.72, before closing at $48.22. This strong performance certainly validates the original signal, as the stock has shown significant upward momentum. The fact that it was able to hold onto most of its gains by the end of the week is also a positive sign. Recent news about MDA Space posting a 34% revenue jump has likely contributed to the stock's strong weekly performance, as the company's growing presence in the US and European markets is clearly paying off. This development is a testament to the company's ability to capitalize on new opportunities, which is great news for investors. As we look ahead to next week, viewers should watch for whether MDA.TO can continue to build on this momentum, and whether the company's upcoming announcements will provide any further catalysts for growth. We'll also be keeping an eye on the stock's technical indicators to see if they continue to support a bullish outlook. Now let's move on to our next stock. We're taking a closer look at stock MTA.V, where our system detected a signal on May 27. This signal was triggered due to a combination of a moving average golden cross and a significant volume surge, so let's break it down. The MA Golden Cross plus volume surge signal is a strong bullish indicator, suggesting a potential trend reversal or continuation, and in this case, it was particularly notable given the volume surge of 155.9%, indicating a high level of investor interest. At the time of the signal, the RSI was at 55.8, which is relatively neutral, but the sudden surge in volume and the golden cross suggested that momentum was building. This signal was particularly compelling given the entry price of $10.09, providing a clear level to watch for potential entry or exit points. This stock had a great week, gaining 16.0%. It opened at $10.49, reached a high of $12.47 and a low of $10.25, closing at $12.17. This performance is a strong validation of the original signal, as the stock has continued to trend upwards, suggesting that the bullish momentum is still intact. The stock's ability to hold above its recent highs is also a positive sign, indicating that the uptrend may continue. The weekly performance is a clear indication that our system's detection of the signal was accurate. There's been some recent news that could be influencing the stock's performance, with activist investors taking action, which can often lead to increased volatility and potential changes in a company's strategy. This could be a factor in the stock's recent surge, as investors anticipate potential changes or improvements. The involvement of activist investors can sometimes lead to a boost in stock price, as seen in this case. As we look ahead to next week, viewers should watch for whether the stock can continue its upward trend and if it can break through any potential resistance levels. We'll also be keeping an eye on any further news or developments that could impact the stock's performance. Now let's move on to our next stock. We're taking a look at stock number 5 of 12, ZDC.V, where we detected a signal on May 22, 2026. This signal was triggered by a golden cross on the moving averages, combined with a significant volume surge, which caught our attention. The MA Golden Cross plus volume surge signal is a bullish indicator, suggesting a potential trend reversal, and at the time, the RSI was at 47.7, which is relatively neutral, so we were watching for a potential upward move. The volume surge was particularly notable, up 163.2%, indicating a lot of interest in the stock. This combination of indicators suggested that ZDC.V was poised for a potential breakout. This week, ZDC.V gained 7.7%, opening at $4.81, reaching a high of $5.32, and a low of $4.77, before closing at $5.18. This performance is a positive validation of the original signal, as the stock continues to trend upward. The weekly gain suggests that the momentum is still with the stock, and we're seeing a continuation of the trend that started with the Golden Cross. There's been some discussion recently about Zcor's earnings potentially not accurately reflecting the company's profitability, which could be a factor in the stock's recent performance. This news may have contributed to some of the volatility we saw this week, but overall, the stock is still trending upward. The company's profitability will be an important thing to watch going forward. As we look ahead to next week, viewers should watch for whether ZDC.V can continue its upward momentum, and whether the stock can break through any resistance levels. We'll also be keeping an eye on any further news or developments that could impact the stock's performance. Now let's move on to our next stock. We're taking a look at stock number 6 of 12, FWZ.V, where we detected a signal on May 20, 2026. This signal was triggered due to a moving average golden cross combined with a volume surge, which is a pretty strong indicator of potential upward momentum. The MA Golden Cross, as you know, occurs when the short-term moving average crosses above the long-term moving average, indicating a potential trend reversal, and when you combine this with a volume surge of 47.7%, it's a pretty compelling signal. At the time, the Relative Strength Index or RSI was at 37.9, which indicated that the stock was not overbought, leaving room for further upside. The entry price at the time of the signal was $4.06, so we were looking for a potential move higher from there. This stock had a pretty good week, gaining 8.4%. It opened at $2.96, reached a high of $3.40, and a low of $2.96, closing at $3.21. This performance is somewhat validating the original signal. Although the stock did pull back from its highs, the overall trend is still looking positive. The fact that it was able to hold onto most of its gains for the week is a good sign. Fireweed Metals has just begun their 2026 field program, which is likely a contributing factor to the stock's recent performance, as investors are looking for signs of progress and potential discoveries. This new program could be a catalyst for further growth, and we'll be keeping an eye on any updates from the company. Looking ahead to next week, we'll be watching to see if the stock can continue its upward momentum, and whether the field program yields any promising results. We'll also be keeping an eye on the stock's technical indicators to see if they're still supporting a bullish outlook. Now let's move on to our next stock. We're taking a closer look at BlackRock Silver, stock symbol BRC.V, where we detected a signal on May 12, 2026. This signal was triggered by a moving average golden cross, combined with a significant volume surge, which caught our attention as a potential buying opportunity. The moving average golden cross, along with the volume surge of 42.7%, indicated a potential trend reversal, suggesting that the stock was about to shift into an upward trajectory. At the time, the Relative Strength Index, or RSI, was at 64.2, which is a relatively neutral position, but the volume surge added conviction to the signal. This combination of indicators suggested that the stock was gaining momentum and could be poised for a move higher. This week, BlackRock Silver gained 20%, a significant move, opening at 90 cents, reaching a high of $1.15, and a low of 89 cents, before closing at $1.08. This performance is a validation of the original signal, as the stock has indeed moved higher, and the volume surge appears to have been a precursor to this move. The stock's ability to hold above the $1 mark is a positive sign, and we'll be watching to see if it can continue this momentum. Recent news suggests that BlackRock Silver is well positioned to deliver on its growth plans, which could be a key driver of the stock's recent performance. This positive outlook could continue to support the stock's price, and we'll be watching for any updates on the company's progress. The company's growth plans appear to be on track, which is a bullish sign for investors. As we look ahead to next week, we'll be watching for any follow-through on this momentum, and whether the stock can continue to build on its recent gains. Viewers should keep an eye on the stock's ability to hold above the $1 mark, as a break above this level could signal further upside. Now let's move on to our next stock. Welcome to our weekly review segment, where we're taking a closer look at stock number 8 of 12, ITR.V. The signal was detected on August 5, 2026, so let's dive into the details. The MA Golden Cross Plus volume surge signal is a pretty strong indicator, and when it happened, it meant that the stock's short-term moving average had crossed above its long-term moving average, combined with a significant increase in trading volume. At the time, the RSI was at 61.1, which suggested that the stock was gaining momentum but not yet overbought. The volume surge of 82.7% on the 5th really caught our attention, as it indicated a lot of interest in the stock. This stock had a great week, gaining 19%, and it's interesting to see how it played out. It opened at $3, reached a high of $3.59 and a low of $2.86, closing at $3.57. This performance definitely validates the original signal, as the stock has continued to trend upward. The gain suggests that investors are still bullish on the stock, and the momentum from the signal has been sustained. There was some news in the sector that's worth mentioning, as MP Materials Corp reported a quarterly loss but beat revenue estimates. This news might have had a ripple effect on the sector, contributing to the stock's weekly gain. It's possible that investors are looking for other opportunities in the space, which could be driving up the price of ITR.V. Looking ahead to next week, viewers should watch for whether the stock can continue its upward trend, and if the volume can remain strong. We'll also be keeping an eye on any further news or developments in the sector that could impact the stock's performance. Now let's move on to our next stock. We're taking a closer look at stock number 9 of 12, AMX.V, which had a signal detected on May 12, 2026. This signal was detected when the stock was trading at $5.15, and it's been an interesting ride since then. The signal we detected was a moving average golden cross combined with a volume surge, which is a pretty bullish indicator, and at the time, the RSI was at 55.4, which isn't overly extended. The volume surge was particularly notable, up 1,031.7%, which suggests a lot of interest in the stock. When we see a golden cross, it means the short-term moving average has crossed above the long-term moving average, which can be a sign of a new uptrend. This week, the stock gained 13.7%, which is a pretty strong move, and it's worth noting that it opened at $3.87, reached a high of $4.54, and a low of $3.70, before closing at $4.40. This performance does seem to validate the original signal, as the stock is continuing to trend higher. The fact that it was able to hold onto most of its gains for the week is also a positive sign. There was some news out this week that Amex Exploration has begun a 15,000-meter drill program at Perron West in Ontario, which could be a catalyst for further gains if the results are positive. This news could be contributing to the stock's strong performance this week, as investors are likely anticipating good things from the drill program. As we look ahead to next week, viewers should watch for whether the stock can continue to build on its momentum, and also keep an eye on any further news out of the company. We'll be keeping a close eye on AMX.V to see if it can keep trending higher, and we'll be back with another update soon. Now let's move on to our next stock. We're taking a look at stock number 10 of 12, which is ASE.V, and the signal was detected on May 26, 2026. This signal was triggered when the MACD had a bullish crossover, combined with a significant volume surge, so let's dive into the details. The MACD bullish crossover plus volume surge signal is a strong indicator of a potential trend reversal, and at the time, it meant that there was a significant shift in momentum, with the stock price at $1.09 and an RSI of 46.9, which is relatively neutral. The volume surge was particularly notable, with an increase of 298.9%, which suggests a high level of interest in the stock. This combination of signals suggested that the stock was poised for a potential upward move. This stock had a great week, gaining 33.3%, it opened at $0.72, reached a high of $0.98 and a low of $0.70, closing at $0.96. This strong performance seems to validate the original signal, as the stock has continued to move upward. The weekly high and low suggest that there was some volatility, but overall, the trend is still positive. The stock's ability to close near its high for the week is also a good sign. There's been some recent news about Asante Gold, with a major private placement and some significant share price moves, which has likely contributed to the stock's valuation being rechecked by investors. This news may have also played a role in the stock's weekly performance, as investors react to the new information. The private placement could provide the company with the necessary funds to drive growth, which could be a positive factor for the stock. As we look ahead to next week, viewers should watch for whether the stock can continue its upward momentum, and whether the MACD bullish crossover signal will continue to hold. We'll also be keeping an eye on any further news or developments that could impact the stock's price. Now let's move on to our next stock. We're reviewing stock number 11 of 12, which is ATRL.2, and the signal was detected on August 6, 2026. This stock caught our attention with a very interesting combination of indicators that suggested a potential buying opportunity. The MA Golden Cross plus volume surge signal is a pretty powerful indicator, and when we saw it on August 6, it meant that the short-term moving average had crossed above the long-term moving average, which is a bullish sign, and it was accompanied by a significant surge in volume, up 39.7%, which can indicate strong buying interest. At the time, the RSI was at 55.6, which is not overbought, so it seemed like a good time to get in. The entry price was $90.92, and we were hoping to see some upside from there. This week, ATRL.TO gained 2.8%, which is a decent move, and it's worth noting that it opened at $85.74, reached a high of $93.75 and a low of $85.62, closing at $88.11. This performance does validate the original signal to some extent, as the stock is still trending upwards, although it's not a huge gain. The fact that it's holding above the entry price is a positive sign, and we're looking for it to continue this momentum. The recent earnings call highlights from AtkinsRéalis Group Inc., which is the company behind ATRL.TO, were pretty impressive, with record EBITDA and a strong performance in the nuclear sector, which could be a major driver of growth for this stock. This news likely contributed to the stock's weekly gain, as investors are becoming more bullish on the company's prospects. The record earnings are a great sign of the company's underlying strength, and we're expecting to see this momentum continue. As we look ahead to next week, we should watch for any follow-through on this bullish momentum, and see if the stock can break above the recent high of $93.75. We're also looking for any potential catalysts that could drive the stock higher, such as further positive news from the company or industry trends. Now let's move on to our next stock. We're wrapping up our 12-stock review with POU.2, a stock that caught our attention on May 13 when our system detected a MACD bullish crossover combined with a significant volume surge. This signal was triggered at an entry price of $30.88, with an RSI of 70.5, and a notable volume surge of 159.6%. The MACD bullish crossover plus volume surge signal is a strong indicator of a potential trend reversal, suggesting that the stock may be poised for an upward move. At the time, this signal indicated that the stock had gained enough momentum to potentially break through resistance levels. The high RSI value, however, did raise some concerns about the stock being overbought, which could lead to a pullback. This week, POU.TO gained 2.7%, opening at $29.32, reaching a high of $31.27, and a low of $27.90, before closing at $30.10. This performance somewhat validates the original signal, as the stock did manage to stay above its entry price. However, the stock's inability to hold its weekly high may indicate some underlying weakness. The weekly range was relatively wide, which could be a sign of increased volatility. Recent news of Shell expanding its Caribbean LNG footprint with a new terminal in the Bahamas may have contributed to the stock's weekly performance, as it could lead to increased demand for LNG-related services. This development may have a positive impact on POU.TO's business, given its involvement in the energy sector. As we move forward, viewers should watch for any follow-through on this week's gains, as well as any potential pullback to the stock support levels. A break above the weekly high could be a strong bullish signal, while a failure to hold the support levels may indicate a trend reversal. That wraps up our weekly review. Subscribe for daily TSX signals from NorthFlow Finance. Thanks for tuning in, subscribe for more, and remember, this is not financial advice, consult a professional before making investment decisions.